What's going on, everyone? So we have an interesting video here. I was on my Twitter recently and I saw a post by Turk. He says you asked for it. So rather than make a long-winded post about it, Turk's a pretty calm, cool guy. I did a collab with VG Fight School. Thanks, man. I hope this helps give some context to the Game Pass profitability conversation. So he has some very interesting data that he came up with using the AI too, and it gives us a reasonable analysis on the way things work when we're talking about operational costs, development costs, and all of that profitability, and seeing how things really work. So we could see it right here on this grid as an example. So let's get into this. This is a long one, but it's important. This is not about being down anything. It's not about being negative. This is literally about just data and none of that. I know that's not what Turk wants either, and we're not doing that. So yeah, let's get into this and let's just get some hard data here.
All right, we're good to go. I'm gonna kick off like an introduction, and not necessarily an introduction, but I'm gonna cut all this part out. That way, you know, and we're gonna dive right in. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Today, I have the Turk, aka Jacob Turkelson, FPS accountant, handheld wizard, and hardware wizard. And we're going to jump into a bunch of numbers. I mean, you already see a spreadsheet on the screen. There's not really going to be much to deal with. But the question on Game Pass's revenue structure, project funding, and all is one that I strongly believe a lot of us who are interested need to dive into. So, the Turk.
Hey, what's up, man?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being willing to do this. And yeah. Just kick it off once you're ready.
Yeah, so one thing that's just driven me nuts these past almost a week at this point, is just the lack of understanding how projects in a larger sense get funded and how those projects actually get broken down into cost segments. So I'm a hardware developer engineer, so I don't do any game development specifically, but once you're actually in the business and you understand how projects actually get funded, a lot of this knowledge just gets carried over. So what I've done is, through the use of ChatGPT, I was able to go and through a learning exercise to extract publicly known available data for various different games for both units sold, development costs, marketing budgets, and all of this stuff. And rather than filtering through Twitter and going through all these other individual data sources, I'm using AI to kind of do that job for me. And my goal here is not to say this specific game would have been profitable with or without Game Pass, but I want to kind of build this rubric or template that would kind of show why a game could be profitable with Game Pass, but also how Game Pass itself benefits from having this type of a structure. But I can also, and maybe we can back and forth a bit on this, is different games would benefit from it and some games wouldn't benefit from it. And I think that's why I follow your channel, having an open conversation, putting fanboyisms aside, and looking at just raw numbers,
I like that.
helps give a picture of what this thing is we're arguing about really means. So that's my intent here. I'm hoping that your audience can appreciate a spreadsheet.
My audience, I have people in my audience that make spreadsheets for me. So
wow.
Yeah, this is right at home for a lot of the folk that watch the channel here.
So you see, this is kind of the introduction so that he can let you know what's going on and what this really means. So now we've gotten to this part and we understand.
And, I started out really casually talking about this stuff, and I realized that there are a lot of people who do this as their daily. I'm talking accountants, financial managers that are among us, or some that are even retired that did stuff like this during their careers. So this is the kind of stuff that, and gaming is great. We love to game, but again, many of us are super busy, and so this is how we kind of stay attached to gaming by proxy, in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is fun stuff. So what do you have for us, the Turk?
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to hear and understand was just like, what does a budget for a game look like? Because, at least in my industry, in my department, we get a bag of money handed to us saying, you've got Project X, Project Y, Project Z coming down the pipe. We've given you 10 people to work on that project. Here's a bag of money. Solve these projects without costing too much more additional money, right? So I went to ChatGPT and was asking the basic question of, what does an average AAA game budget look like? And of course, I asked it to spit it out as a CSV, comma separated values file, so that I could throw it into Excel and start doing some math.
Okay.
So
Okay.
basically, it breaks down into 3 different chunks. There's the development cost, which includes the core game development, tools and middleware licensing. I'm not going to read it out because your people watching can look at this.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then it also breaks down into the marketing and the operations costs, with some really large numbers attached to it. As many people know, AAA games are getting more and more expensive, and it's really important to keep in mind some of these sub costs, right? You know, if you're going to go and host a bunch of content creators to come to an event, provide screen capturing material, pay for the people that are doing that, all of that costs money, right?
Yep.
But in the grand sense of things, when it comes to a budget for a game, it's like 2% of the overall budget.
Correct.
So putting all these numbers onto a page so people can look at it really helps people understand just the gravity of money that's required to produce a game. Of course, this is a AAA game. This isn't any specific game, but it is
It's a good example.
reasonably, what did ChatGPT say? This has reasonable confidence of what a game cost structure would look like.
Yeah.
Of course, this is just a template, right?
So they're giving you pretty much the average aspect of a AAA game at a company like that. You know what I mean? And you're seeing right here that it's 188 million without the Game Pass offset. And then after that, it goes down to 158 million. So that's what it costs to get it on there or whatever. It's like an average thing. But as you see, it's expensive. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And that's not factored in, but that is incredibly important.
Could be games where they go and spend $80 million on marketing, and that balloons costs accordingly, right? But this is, again, I'm not trying to prove a specific game is profitable or not. I just
No.
want to show how Game Pass fits into the equation.
Correct.
Got it.
So that's where this chunk comes in. And Game Pass is literally just a bag of money being handed from Microsoft or Xbox to the developer and saying, we're wanting to have your game on our service. We are going to pay you this amount of money, and this is the expectation. But it's a little bit more than that. And the Christopher Drink drama kind of brought up a lot of this, right?
Yes.
There is an assumption of lost premium sales revenue, and there is a lost microtransaction and upsell revenue that is assumed with that bag of money from Xbox. Because, and ChatGPT did a really good job of showing actual, articles and data points of where this shows up.
Right
Yeah.
there.
If you're going to sell 1 million units at $60, that's part of this equation. And there is a percentage of users that spend money on microtransactions and whatever, and that's where they get the $5 million from. So it's like there are people within Xbox and within the game development studios that know what these numbers are. And this, hypothetical $30 million infusion, it's not just some random number. People go in and determine what amount of money is appropriate to put a game onto Game Pass.
I see.
And for the astute people looking at these numbers, this is not a very good number for this type of game. It is not actually beneficial for the studio.
Yeah, because if you have this going, that 30 million is definitely not good. It's too high of a percentage.
But we'll get to more game examples in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So important to keep in mind going forward. This is all pre-launch of the game. Game Pass has already delivered the money. The studio has already assumed the cost or the infusion of money, and it's able to, do that as it wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see that in manifestation in future games. But it's important to note, without the Game Pass infusion or offset, this hypothetical AAA game would be $188 million. And with the Game Pass infusion, it'd be $158 million.
Effectively,
Yeah.
usually, and this model. Okay, first I was looking, I was like, okay, 120
Studio
million,
costs
but
is
that was just for the
reduced.
core game development. But the total speaks of a realistic picture. That $200 million sweet spot, which is 188. That makes sense now.
Yeah, and again, this is a template. This isn't
Yep.
specific. But again, we're going to
Good
get into the
example.
game examples because as much as this sounds good, and if you're into budgeting and stuff, this kind of makes sense. 80% of your budget's going towards development costs. You're spending roughly 13% for marketing, and 7% is kind of your, general day-to-day operations for your development studio for that game. These numbers are reasonable. Nothing seems too outlandish. Those percentages can go up or down, but for going forward, the big thing here is just the overall budget.
Got it.
Anyway, okay, so what I did was I asked ChatGPT for some baseline numbers for various different games that have come out that have publicly known sales numbers, publicly known development costs, and I wanted to kind of figure out what it costs to produce the game per copy and how much profit is coming from the game itself. So, Horizon Forbidden West, popular PlayStation game, is allegedly costed about 130 million to produce and allegedly made 8.4 million in copies sold. Again, I don't want to get into the minutia of
No, that's
these
all
were
right.
PlayStation 4 copies, these were PlayStation 5 remasters, these were PC.
Yeah, he's just trying to give you a good picture so that you can understand how these things work. Once you get this, you know what I mean? It helps you realize the way things work. Then it's pretty obvious to you. And it's the type of stuff we've always been talking about.
Copies sold. That gets into the weeds really quick, and I just want to focus on the broader picture.
The big picture,
right?
yeah.
I mean, 8.4 million copies. I just wanted to ask, will be a timeline, right? Because that franchise has sold way more.
I think.
Now.
Yeah, I think this might have been in 2021.
Okay.
Data numbers.
Okay.
This is.
Yeah, that's the PlayStation 5 version. And then obviously Zero Dawn was the other one. That one was 60. This one actually became 70.
What ChatGPT showed. So, again, I don't want to get too into the specifics of it and use it more as a case study example point.
Okay,
Yeah,
good. I wanted us to highlight that. That way, it wasn't like, oh, okay, got it.
Yep.
That's
so from the developer's perspective, they used 130 million of their money that they received from their overlords. I believe that would just be PlayStation funding them. I don't think that the development studio themselves forked over the money, but in their budget sheet, they got 130 million, and based on how many copies they sold, they basically think of it as it costs $15 per game sold to make this game. That data point isn't important for that specific game, but as we look at more samples, it'll become more important.
Yeah.
From the 500 or the 8.4 million sold, they were able to make $504 million in total revenue. Again, this isn't taking platform sale costs. This isn't taking the 70-30% split into account.
Okay.
Because that's just going to get into the weeds. And again, I want us to focus on the overall accounting of what would it potentially look like.
Correct. And because he's doing this for every game, they all get that bonus that looks like that. You know what I mean? So it's not uneven where it's like this gets this treatment and this gets that treatment. No, they're all just looking like that. You know what I mean? But you get a generalization here, which is actually really good. And the reason why you want to understand this first is because you need to understand that no matter what, this is always the gaming industry. You have to make a game this way. So that when you come to Game Pass, they're saying, hey, we'll give you 30 million to put your 150 million on our, service. You have to really think about that mathematically. Does it make sense? Though I love Game Pass as well, obviously. But like I said, this is a video not about that, but this just has to be looked at realistically. Because if you love that studio and you want them to survive, if this keeps happening and they weren't making profit and they go under, you don't have the game you care about anymore in the devs. So that's what people have to understand. And then if they just throw it to AI, yeah, you should be mad.
Got it.
And this is basically just this title or the amount of copies sold times the price. I believe it launched at $60. Remakes, sales, all that other stuff. I don't want to get into that because it's not useful for this conversation. So then we just take the total revenue minus the total dev costs, and we have a total gross profit of $374 million, which is pretty dang good.
Yeah.
That comes out to be about $44.50 per copy sold is just is gross profit.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big split between 15% or $15 and $44.
I see.
But what's crazy is this is just one game. So I went ahead and did the same thing for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Spider-Man 2018. I believe this is just the PlayStation 4 version. I don't think this includes remakes
PC or
and stuff.
anything. Yeah, the PlayStation 4 version was the one that really did it went nuts. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Last of Us Part 2. And what you'll notice here is Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Spider-Man are significantly less per copy to develop for because their dev costs were, a little bit higher than Forbidden West, but also a little less than Forbidden West. Sold similar amount of copies, made similar amounts of money, but that gross profit is huge because they sold a whole bunch of copies.
Yep.
Correct.
And ultimately, their profit per copy sold is, around $55, which is awesome. And then Last of Us Part 2, it's a little bit less expensive per copy. Again, this is, I believe, just the PlayStation 4 release, not any of the other remasters and stuff. It was less expensive to develop for based on Forbidden West, but it ultimately didn't make as much money, which I thought was really interesting. With their gross profit and a profit per copy being about $50. So, at least to me, this all seems pretty reasonable. Why would you make a game if your profit's only going to be $20 per copy, only going to be, $10 per copy, right?
I see.
So do you have any questions about this? Because we're about to throw Game Pass into the mix.
So far, I guess I wouldn't say necessarily. Well, yeah. So The Last of Us Part 2 is an interesting case study. Do you think that's the reason because its development cost was probably lower compared to its yield in terms of profit per copy? Do you think that's one of the reasons they continue to remaster the franchise and put it out there in different forms?
We'll get to that specific answer in a little bit.
Okay.
But I think the main thing why the dev cost was a lot less is because it was an improvement on Last of Us Part 1. So Last of Us Part 1 probably cost more to develop, took a little bit longer to create.
Yeah, he's talking about reused assets, correct?
And that made it not as profitable, maybe. Again, I don't have the data, can't speak too much to it. But since they already had a framework in place, they probably didn't spend as much money towards the development cost.
Okay.
And what would be interesting, if anyone wants to find the data for it, what does Forza Horizon Forbidden West or
Horizon Forbidden West. Wrong.
Well, wrong game. Sorry, I'm not a PlayStation guy. So Zero Dawn was the first one. So I'd be interested in seeing the Zero Dawn's development costs and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with all that in mind, I want to throw in everyone's favorite game to crap on when it comes to Xbox, and that's Starfield.
Are we guys we
I'm not
ready?
gonna yeah, I'm not going to show the future lines because I want to take this step by step in the entire argument, right?
Yeah. 200 million to make that game, guys. See what I mean? Um, but it cost them $64 per copy. That's insane. What?
So there's rumors that Starfield allegedly cost $200 million to develop, and according to some of the estimates from copies sold on Steam, they only sold 3.1 million copies. So total revenue, this was times 70 for the box number. It cost them nearly $65 per copy to develop the game, with only $5.50 in profit per copy.
Wow.
So see what I mean by how these other games make a whole bunch more sense to release, and why Starfield, if we're only focusing on Steam PC sales, doesn't make sense to develop. That's bad.
Oh
Yeah.
That's oof.
Yeah, and since the dev
It is, and that's what I mean by like the old Bethesda should have been doing way better than that. This game should be at like 15 to 20 million copies sold right now. Yeah, that's bad management. But a lot of that has to do with what's going on in Bethesda as well. Um, man.
and we'll get to why I think dev costs were so high here in a bit, but this is just like the baseline for Starfield. So now I want to introduce Gamepass. So I went ahead and removed the development totals and stuff, and I estimated how much stimulus is required from Game Pass to make Starfield a profitable enterprise with the infusion in place.
Oh, because I'm like, that does not make any sense at all. But since he's saying that, okay, I get what he's trying to do here. This is not really reality, but I see what he's saying as an example, if that was the case.
In order to do that, this is all alleged. This is not any insider information. Do not take this
That's
as
serious.
the gospel. Please don't take me out of context here, guys. I'm thinking.
So, guys, he's trying to show you something here. This doesn't mean that this is reality. So don't take this and run with it and clip him and be a dick about it or go the other way with it as well. He's just trying to give people a general understanding of what that would be like if the dev cost was like that, all that. You know what I mean? You can't take this as if like he pulled this up and got this from some developer and it's 100% facts, and you know what I mean? Because people can run so far by being a fanboy. You know what I mean? I'm not on camera because I want y'all to see like all the numbers right here, definitely on the right. And my thing here is we're just here to like look at facts and give good examples. It doesn't matter whether it's 100% accurate or not. That's not what this is about. This is about a good example. So let's just remember that.
Xbox would have had to stimulate the development costs by $138 million.
Yeah.
That is like the entire Assassin's Creed Valhalla development budget. Xbox had to fork over that much money in order for the development cost per copy by Bethesda to be within striking distance of these other games, and the profit per game sold, just on sales alone, Steam sales alone, to be in line with other games.
Jeez. Yeah, guys. See, it's exactly what I thought. Like I said, this is not a beating down video. I'm not coming in here bringing that in Turks. Well, I know how he is. You know what I mean? I'm respectful like that. You know what I mean? I told you I don't attack good people doing good work. I'm just here to like kind of react a little bit in my own world. But this is not against, anything like that. But yeah, I understand what he's saying. And if you guys feel like this is confusing to you, just talk to me in the comments on my video. I don't care. I don't mind replying.
And you might be saying, before I go on, what strikes you here, VG?
I'm looking at that revenue segment. That's where my eyes are tuned to right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, $138 million is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's factor that into Game Pass. So I don't even think it's alleged. I think the developers said there were 15 million gamers playing Starfield, right?
I remember around 11. I remember they did one big post. 11 million players had played Starfield. That number I remember very vividly. Did they go up to 15?
I think eventually it got to 15 million.
Okay.
I'm
Maybe, I don't
pretty
know.
sure you could Google that.
Let me look it up
to
real
find
quick.
out.
That's not gonna take me any time.
Yeah, the thing with players though
Real
is,
quick, 11 million.
well, yeah, he doesn't want to get into that. Never mind. We're just gonna try to get like general
Starfield.
responses.
And then I'll do one for 15 million players. Just so I can get that. Oh, there it is. You are right. Starfield. This is the Starfield subreddit that says there is an image that says thanks to 10 million players, and there is a subreddit, a Starfield subreddit that says that Starfield hit 15 million players with an IGN article that said it hit 15 million players as a patch added new achievement-friendly creations and vehicles and such. So the patch brought in a whole ton of people into the ecosystem. Okay, cool.
Okay. So again, this isn't to say anything's definitively proven here, but for the sake of our template here, we're kind of assuming that the total amount of copies sold plus the total amount of Game Pass users would equate to 15 million. And what I find really interesting here is going through some of the financials for Game Pass themselves. I heard there's a range that it costs per user between $5 and $7 for the service from Game Pass's side, and that there's a 40 to 60% margin for each user for the service. And what's funny is when I pipe these numbers in, I get those exact same figures out. So gross revenue per user on average is about $12 per Game Pass user.
Yep.
And 7 plus 5 is 12. So this is very reasonable, a reasonable assumption. So the big thing here is with Game Pass, the game only made $155 million, which isn't a lot of money compared to some of these other games. And Microsoft, through that 1 month of subscriptions, or I guess it would be 1 month of subscriptions, right? $12 per user. Microsoft made $57.5 million out of it. So
Okay, you know what? No. We're not gonna do it because, like he said, he just wants to not get in the weeds of whether people got CD keys, conversions. Like that's really hard to get a real number off of. But I see what he means though.
ironically, in total, they probably made.
The only thing that I kind of find is that copies compared to players. Well, I think they're trying to convert those players to people who are paying that average fee that he was talking about and multiplying that here as gross profit. I think that's what he was doing. Pretty sure.
212 million across both companies. But Starfield ultimately didn't make as much as they probably wanted to, right?
Not even close.
So let's take into account some of these figures if we don't have Game Pass and we only focus on just pure sales, right? So I went ahead and used that same 15 million copies being sold, but since they're not getting a Game Pass infusion, the development cost is $200 million.
Got it.
So overall, the price per copy makes about 13 bucks per copy, which is within the range of what we saw before. That revenue is really, really, really high of $1 billion, right?
Billion
And the gross
55.
and the gross profit is huge of $850 million. And the profit per title is 56, which is above any of these other games.
Correct.
Even above Spider-Man. But my contention here is, would Starfield have sold 15 million copies? Because
if it launched on PlayStation, day one, it's a good question. But you guys see why anybody that sells a lot, like why they would never want to be on that. Because like I was saying, what you're not making and the potential, definitely for people that are good developers, like Baldur's Gate sold 20 million, you know what I mean, at 70. I'm telling you, in their mind, that's insane. Same thing with Bobby Kotick and the way, other people think. Now, it's good, like he was saying, it works for some games and it doesn't work for others. But it's a really good service in general for people who are definitely on a budget because shit's too expensive in real life. And, I understand that. I tell people, like I told them before, I would never be against people being able to afford a service and be able to afford things. And if that's your only way in life and you know what I mean? You feel like that's a threat, and I was trying to attack that. That's not what I was doing. No, I was trying to show people the truth about Microsoft's lies. I'm more interested in seeing how all this gets out. Now we're getting to this. We see this, right? Now, you will never find a video of me telling somebody that they should unsub or sell your system or something like that. I never said that. You ain't never going to see me say that because I'm not against people's choice in gaming. That sense. You see what I mean? No, I'm against a corporation and their anti-consumer behavior. And just give people the truth because we wouldn't have to do all this if they would have just gave people the numbers and stop hiding them. You see? But now we gotta get wizardly on them. So you guys see it here.
Hear a lot of people online saying, oh, if it wasn't 15 million copies sold, what was really sold, right?
Yeah.
This is like the best case scenario. If every single user purchased the game, this is the maximum amount of money they could have generated, right? So now I want
it full price as well too, or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
This is times 70.
70, yeah.
Yep. So this is like, if all of the fanboys said is true, this would be this number, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we got to remember, Game Pass only gave $138 million. If you take that into account, that's only like Xbox bought 2 million copies and subsidized that much amount of sales.
Correct.
That's what this new row is. It's the 3.1 million sold on Steam, plus the revenue that was assumed from the Xbox Infusion.
That's
because
the loss premium sales.
Exactly.
Yes.
The estimated loss of revenue based on the amount of units times the cost of the game.
Got it.
So that's what, I forget, we don't want to get to that just yet. So that's where this 5.1 million copies comes from. Again, that's a pretty decent amount.
Yeah.
But we're also comparing this against games that cost $70 million less to create. So if the developer was to assume all of the development costs and all of the risk, they're looking at almost more than twice the amount of development costs per copy, and they're also assuming so much less profit per copy.
Yeah.
Huh.
But let's look at these two figures. If they only were to sell 5,100,000 copies versus the Game Pass where they only sold 3.1 million, the gross profit delta there is $2 million.
Yes.
So Game Pass is profitable, just like if they were to sell the same amount of copies assumed with the Game Pass infusion.
Wow.
This is the break-even point, and why Game Pass is actually a decent proposition for some.
Yeah, decent. Okay, that's a good word. I understand what he's trying to say here if you want to look at it in that sort of sense. But yeah, it's not going to be something that's going to make Microsoft a ton of money, though. When I say profitable, that means like, yeah, it's profitable. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, bro, it's profitable. We're bank. No, it's not like that, guys. He's just saying like, yeah, it's decent profit. You know what I mean? But it's just too expensive, man. These games. Even if Microsoft wasn't messing up, you know what I mean? It's like, That's why even Sony was saying it, and they're selling 3 times as much. You know what I mean? 4 times as much as times certain things. So this is just to let you know it's not made up. They weren't lying. And Sean Layden, I don't see, one thing I like about him, he hardly ever lies. Like, I followed that guy for a while. You know what I mean? And I'm telling you, he's pretty straight up. There's a funny video I got coming with him though. Y'all look out for that, or maybe it may be after this video, whichever one I decide to put up. But I mean, yeah, this doesn't mean that it's negative. You know what I mean? No, this just all we're seeing here is just the truth about things. You see what I mean? And games are even more expensive now. They were comparing like older games. The profit is even more harder now. It is. This was before all that other stuff was factored in, coming in with all the tariffs and all. Dude, yeah, it starts getting very interesting. I can't wait to see how all that's going to be factored in when that's done.
Games.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
So, and somebody might ask, does this mean that or I mean, the games that are already in development, right? When they acquired Bethesda, games that they probably like or they see a lot of prospects, in terms of their individual sales will probably still go through. But can somebody say, well, now are they going to start curating games that they see the data that they do well for Game Pass? As time goes on, is this going to be something that shapes the industry into a pigeonhole of some sort?
Possibly. I think it really boils down to the developer wanting to assume risk, right? Mm-hmm. Because this $200 million is probably, this is an assumption on my part, is extremely high based on the amount of investment from a third party, right?
Yeah.
Because all of these other games, Last of Us Part 2, Horizon Forbidden West, top tier AAA games, costing nearly half as much to develop. I think with Starfield, they just had a lot of extra money and they just spent a lot of extra money. That's, of course, my opinion.
Correct.
So it's like Starfield could have cost less. And then, like, let's say, we'll put it here, 130 million. Sorry if the numbers I'm missing some zeros. But if Starfield only, cost 130 million to produce, this game looks much better. And the gross profit without Game Pass included is almost 75 million more?
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge chunk of change.
Yeah.
Just by making their dev costs smaller.
What he said right now is the reason why developers are having issues. It's because of that over budgeted nonsense, over details, over engineering. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, the game looks good enough. Let's focus on other things and find a balance here. And let's keep it going for a long time. Not blow everything on one game and then it doesn't do what you need it to do. And then you're just being tanked. All for freaking visuals. Doesn't work. Stop doing it.
So,
but that's not reality.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's just so many presumptions that can be made here too, and a lot of this is probably lining up with what we're seeing now. Xbox hasn't been
true. I like Turk because he's just about the hard facts and facing the truth, get into it. He's like, dude, come on, man. You don't got to be all that. Let's not too much of that. I'm giving you the data here, and I'm doing the work. And when somebody came to me with that much work, I'm already seeing that. So in my mind, no, that I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to respect his work, take a look at it, listen to what he has to say, because that's his field. And let's be open-minded about it and not be fanboys and get offended or upset or any of that type of stuff. Because he's helping you understand things. Either you want to listen to this so that you can understand things better, or you could just be ignorant and be like, I don't care. Or, you could just choose to say, I'm just going to go play the game. You're not bad because you do that. But I'm just saying. Remember,
too explicit in talking about its development costs. Personally, it has talked about the rising cost of games from Phil Spencer, but I do remember that the PlayStation executives did mention operational excellence and also Hiroki Totoki talking about financial discipline. These are very key words that these numbers that we have, they're based on, publicly available data and just creating a model and a template. But now I see the numbers backing up what it is that they're saying.
Yeah, there's definitely a from a developer's perspective, there is a reason to take that Game Pass bag of cash. But let's go ahead and scroll down. I also did an example here with Horizon Forbidden West with Game Pass and also without Game Pass. So I assumed Forbidden West developers said, I want Microsoft to pay for half of my game. So that's the $65 million worth of infusion coming into the game, which reduces their dev costs by half. And that cut their cost per copy in half. And it also increased their profit per copy by $8 per copy. Ultimately, they sold this many copies, 8.4 million already. So this would be an example of like Game Pass going to them and saying, hey, we'd love to have your service, right? So Game Pass gives this bag of cash. It allows them to earn a little bit of extra profit. I say a little bit extra profit. That's 439 million versus 374 million.
That's a good amount.
Yeah.
You see, now that would be nice if you were able to sell that much. See, that's what Microsoft wants by trying to be a third-party publisher and having that, because then it can look positive. Basically what he's saying right there.
Yeah. And that's just straight cash on top, right? It's not too much additional work. I doubt it cost them 65 million, or it would cost them 65 million to port that game to Xbox. So that number to the developer is just super high profit margin. But then Xbox, by giving 65 million for their infusion, I would estimate that would be close to 5.4 million gamers that would be able to play the game. And that would make Xbox $27 million on top of it.
Wow.
So this would be the instance where a already successful game gets added to Game Pass.
Correct.
And this would be the best case for the developer. But
that's what Sony's doing. That's why they're not doing first party. That's what I was telling people. It's not the best for the developer what they're doing, but we love the benefit, obviously. And the reason why that hurts us in the long term is if the developer is not making any profit and then they get shut down because they're not producing the sales, because Microsoft has cannibalized the sales with their method. And like when you think about it in that fashion, if that happens to so many developers and you care about all those games coming out of them, even if you were just playing something like 2K or whatever, you know what I mean? And that has to go away. You were used to buying that every year. That's what you cared about. You said you got your bag, right? Well, what if it ain't there anymore and the devs are gone because that destroyed them? Yeah, because you care about the game. That's what I'm saying. So at that point, you guys got to think about it. It matters in that sense. Never was there a time where AGN was making a video to beat down Game Pass and try to make it seem like it needs to go away. Sorry, that's not what I think, because I like it myself. You see what I mean? I want my own benefit, so I'm not against it. What I'm against is developers being destroyed for lies. Don't make me think that you're being pro-consumer and beneficial to every developer and making it seem like it's the best thing in gaming, when really behind the scenes, that's not what's happening here. So yeah, to all of you after this video, hey man, look forward to Tony Hawk coming out, Wu-Chang, all those games. We're all going to be there. I'm not against that. I'm still wanting to support the Xbox community. Want you guys to get Helldivers too. Looking forward to seeing that happening. Though I'm going to be more interested in Lost Soul Aside, because that's new to me. I already have Helldivers on PlayStation. But yeah, you guys are going to enjoy that. And then I'm looking forward to you guys, getting more future games if you can. It ain't going to hurt me. I already got my experience. You see what I mean? I'm not the type of person to be like that. It is what it is. If the company said it, well, shit. Then everybody should just be like, well, they said it, so what else are we going to do about it? But we got the truth here. As far as like, now I understand truthfully how this actually gives me an example and how things work. Time and time again, I gave you guys multiple videos of where Turk goes out and does work, kind of like nobody else does in the circle that we know. And he's a cool guy. And like I said, please don't attack him and disrespect his work. He's not coming here to make anything look a certain way. He just wants to show you data. That's it. Peace out. You'll have a great day. Let me know what you guys think about this. This is a long one, but it needs to be. Later.